I played 100 games straight with Stu in 4 of his best modes, Gem Grab, Brawl Ball, Siege, and Hot Zone. And for each game, I recorded the time it took, whether or not it was a win or a loss, whether or not I was star player, whether or not it was underdog, every possible stat you could think of. So that way we can figure out the best modes to push him in, starting from 0 trophies, as well as the best modes to push him at the higher trophy levels, as well as how good he is when you play with other randoms, because all these games were with randoms. So make sure to stick around until the end so we can cover all these tips that I got from the stats from these 100 games. So since I played 100 games over 4 different modes, that comes out to 25 games per mode, and here is a table showing the results for each game. Each box here represents a particular game, and there are 25 games in each row, all corresponding to the mode on the left hand side. It's colored green if I won, white if I didn't win, and gray if it was a tie. And then I also put a star on the inside if I was the star player, and I put a dash if it was an underdog game, or both if both happened. Not trying to flex, but it did happen 3 out of the 4 times I got underdog, just saying. So at the very beginning of these 100 games, I started Stu at 200 trophies before I had really pushed him up at all, and 200 trophies is basically just enough to get out of the range where basically everyone's playing Stu, and it also ensures that I'm high enough to not be playing bots, because that's what happens when you're at a really low trophy count. So I started at just over 200 trophies, and by the end of these 100 games, I made it all the way up to 627 trophies with Stu. Now I kind of wish I had gone a little higher. You can see at the end there were a ton of losses. I got really tilted in those last few games at the end, and I was losing because of kind of stupid reasons. I definitely could have won a lot of those games, so I probably could have ended up a bit higher, but generally speaking, I had a pretty high win rate. It came out to winning 70 out of the 100 games and tying one of them, so that's about a win rate of 70.5%. Now, for the first 50 games, I had a bit higher win rate at 73%, and the last 50, I had a win rate at 68%. So it did decrease a little, but not all that much, which is why I'm pretty confident I could have pushed a lot higher. And even after this, I did manage to push my Stu all the way up to 750 pretty easily. Now, the interesting thing is when we take a look at the win rates for each of the individual modes, you'll notice that in Gem Grab, I had the fewest losses out of all the different game modes, and I actually had a win rate of 80% in my Gem Grab games. So out of the 25 I played, I won 20 out of those 25 games. And compared to the other modes, that's really, really high, because with Brawl Ball, I only had a 66% win rate, and with Siege and Hot Zone, I only had a 68% win rate. So this graph here shows the win rates for each of those different modes, and you'll notice that Gem Grab is in fact a decent portion higher than the other 3 modes. And in each of the bars on this graph, I did put the average time that each match took for that particular mode. So Hot Zone and Gem Grab were the quickest games on average, clocking in under 2 minutes each, and Brawl Ball and Siege were each just over 2 minutes on average, so they were a bit slower to complete. Now, all of these stats could vary a bit depending on which map you're running in a particular mode. So I'll tell you that for Gem Grab, I played on the map called Arène en Folie. For Brawl Ball, I played on Encirclement. For Siege, it was Bot Riot, and for Hot Zone, it was Parallel Plays. Now, these are all fairly standard maps for those modes, but some of them may have particular characteristics that made it a bit more difficult or a bit easier for Stu to come out on top. For example, with the Brawl Ball map, there are a lot of walls directly in front of the goal, and that makes it kind of hard for Stu when those walls aren't broken, because even though he does have the dash for mobility, it is sometimes very, very hard to dash around those walls completely without your opponents being able to stop you. Whereas if those walls weren't there, his dash could become really clutch, because you could dash and quickly super shot the ball straight into the goal or something like that. There's a lot of cool plays you can do when the walls aren't there, because you're going to constantly have your super up. And of course, if you're running Stu on Brawl Ball, you're not a wall breaker, so you only have 2 teammates who have a potential chance of being a wall breaker, where your opponents essentially have 3 opportunities to get a wall breaker, 1 for each of their players. So I definitely think the Brawl Ball win rate could have been a lot higher if it was a different map, and in fact, even on the higher trophies, I had a noticeably increased Brawl Ball win rate when I was playing with more skilled players who knew how to create particular opportunities in the game that you could then take advantage of playing as Stu. Just keep that in mind, that there is always going to be a bit of variance to this depending on what maps you're going to be playing on. Now, outside of win rate, I also calculated data on the star player rate and the underdog win rate. So in terms of the star player rate, I just calculated this based on the number of times I got star player divided by the total number of times I won or tied in the game, since when you tie, you also have a chance of getting star player. And I actually had a pretty massive percentage for this. At 76.1% of all my wins, I got star player on. Now, on average, you're going to be getting about a 33% rate, since 1 out of the 3 people on your team is going to get star player. So the fact that I got over 75% star player rate shows that Stu was carrying a lot of these games. And in fact, up until the 500 trophy point, I think there were only 1 or 2 games that I actually didn't get star player on when we won. So that just shows that the times that we lost probably weren't because of me. Just throwing that out there, no shade or anything. but it also just shows Stu's general ability to carry, because I still had a pretty high star player rate even when I went up to the higher trophy ranges. Now in terms of underdog win rate, I did only have 4 underdog games, so this data isn't going to be very significant, but I did manage to win 3 out of the 4 underdog games that I played. So that also supports the notion that Stu is very good at carrying games even when there is a bit of a disadvantage. Now from this data, I was able to combine these numbers to create more meaningful statistics that we can directly use to see which modes are going to be better for pushing, because we don't necessarily just want to use the win rate, because that doesn't tell the whole story. So first, what I calculated is the wins per minute. And so basically what I did is I just divided the total number of wins I got in a mode by the sum of all the time it took me to play all 25 games for that mode, to calculate just how many wins I would be getting per minute if I was playing only that mode. And this is a graph that represents those values. And you can see that Hot Zone and Gem Grab are very close to the same. And that's because Gem Grab had a really high win rate, so of course its wins per minute is going to be fairly high. And Hot Zone actually didn't have as high of a win rate, but because the games were so quick, you were able to get more wins per minute overall. So that's why that bar is also very high compared to Brawl Ball and Siege, who are lower, because Brawl Ball and Siege both had fairly low win rates and fairly long games. This implies that Gem Grab and Hot Zone are probably going to be better for pushing Stu at lower trophies when you're going to be winning basically every game. So all that really matters is how many wins you're going to be getting per minute and how quickly you're going to be able to do that. Because at low trophies, you're not really concerned about losing, you're just concerned about getting trophies as fast as possible. So this statistic sort of captures that idea into one value. But there's actually a way to specify this further, and what we can consider is, instead of just calculating the wins per minute, is calculating the actual number of trophies per minute that you would be gaining from each of these modes. And so for this, I just calculated 8 times the number of wins you got, since that would be the number of trophies you got from the wins, and subtracted off 8 times the number of losses you got in any particular mode, because you would lose 8 trophies for every loss. Now obviously at lower trophy ranges, you would be losing fewer trophies, but it doesn't really matter as long as you plug in a constant value for the number of trophies you're losing. The trophies per minute values are all going to be proportionally the same relative to another. So we don't really need to concern ourselves with the exact values, but instead just which ones are the highest compared to the others. And so after I calculated the total number of trophies, of course I also divided that by the total time it took for all the games in that mode, since we're looking at the trophies per minute and how fast you're going to be able to gain these trophies. And so after making those calculations, these were the resulting values I got for each mode. And here it becomes clear that Gem Grab is going to be the best mode to push trophies the fastest. It has over double the trophies per minute that Brawl Ball and Siege do, and a pretty significant advantage over Hot Zone as well. And that's mainly due to the fact that Gem Grab had such a high win rate, and even though the games were not as fast as Hot Zone, they were still pretty fast, so you were able to get a lot of wins really quickly, and you weren't getting too many losses because the win rate is high. Now, even though Hot Zone's wins per minute was close to that of Gem Grab, because Hot Zone had a significantly worse win rate, its losses per minute were also pretty high. And so when you actually consider the trophies you're gaining, the losses per minute really take a toll on that for Hot Zone, so you're not going to be getting as many trophies per minute as you would be doing with Gem Grab. Now, like I said, all of this is a bit dependent on what map you're picking, and it can also vary person to person depending on what modes you tend to be good at, even though I feel like I tend to be the best at Brawl Ball, and Brawl Ball here has gotten the worst results. But generally speaking, it does seem like you're going to be able to push trophies the fastest, at least at the lower trophy ranges, on Gem Grab, and then in second place, Hot Zone. So that brings us to the overall conclusions that we can come to from this data. So first of all, the best modes to push him in when you've just unlocked him and he's at 0 trophies. I would highly recommend Gem Grab and Hot Zone if you're going to pick a 3v3 mode. Showdown is always pretty good as well for pushing, so if you enjoy that, then you can do Showdown, but if you don't want to play Showdown and you want to stick to 3v3, Gem Grab and Hot Zone are going to be very, very close to the same trophy increase rate that you would be able to get from Showdown. Now, once you push him up to about the average trophy level of all your brawlers and the games start to get pretty hard for you, then you want to switch to the modes with the highest win rate, because at that point, if you want to gain trophies, it doesn't matter so much about how fast the games are, it just matters that you win the games as much as possible. So in that case, you want to switch to the modes with the highest win rate, which was definitely Gem Grab. And in second place behind Gem Grab, I would put Brawl Ball, because even though it had a low win rate compared to Gem Grab, it actually had the same win rate as Gem Grab for the last half of the games. I think it was just that early on, the games in Brawl Ball were pretty tough with randoms who were very low in trophies, so when you start playing with randoms who know a bit more about Brawl Ball, there's a lot more opportunities that open up for Stu, and that's why I was able to get the best win rate tied with Gem Grab for the last half of the games. So Brawl Ball and Gem Grab seem like the best options if you're just looking to push trophies on Stu. Now, in terms of playing with randoms in something like Power League, he's going to be a very, very good option because he's extremely good at carrying, as you can see from his super high star player rate. Now, that doesn't mean you want to play extremely aggressive, because he does have low health and you can die easily if you're not careful. But this does mean that you can be dishing out a lot of damage, and whatever the win condition for your particular game is, Stu is going to have a very good chance of being able to do a large portion of that himself, regardless of what your randoms are playing. So that's why Stu is going to be a good option if you're just playing with randoms on ladder or with randoms in Power League or something like that. So hopefully this information is helpful no matter where you are in your Stu pushing. Make sure to subscribe if you want to see more videos like this. But that's all for today, guys. So see you later.